Thank you very much. Let me start with a couple questions. I'm going to be pretty flexible on the time, but I'd ask everybody, as always, to try to keep an eye on the clock. We know the statistics. They are, frankly, very impressive. I'm not going to repeat those, but we've heard from you all, and all of us know that. And this subcommittee, on both sides of the aisle, has supported PEPFAR for many, many years. But as I mentioned in my opening statement, I think we all need to agree that we have to look at what are the next steps. Are we going to fund this forever, in perpetuity? Is there going to be no ending? How can we hand these programs back to the countries and to the private sector and other donors, if necessary? And while we talk about, and I think rightfully so, the really impressive accomplishments, historic accomplishments, let me mention the price tag for that investment. So far, it's about $110 billion since 2003. That's a heck of a lot of money. Even for federal standards, that's a lot of money. And we all have talked about, and you heard it again this morning, about, well, how this also helps us with partnerships around the world, and it helps countries, be closer to us. But I think the American taxpayer looks at, for example, South Africa. Let me just throw one example out there. This is a country that obviously, we have a strong presence. PEPFAR has a strong presence. But look what the government is doing. They're doing joint naval exercises with Russia. They're prosecuting Israel at the International Court of Justice, and a number of other actions that are working against U.S. national security interests. So I think it's fair to ask these questions, which is it working? Can we do better? And again, as I mentioned before, for how long? That's not being heartless or callous. That is standing up for the American taxpayer, and I would argue for the national security interests of the United States as well. So I'll start with you, Mr. Ambassador. You mentioned this in your opening statements, but what are some recommendations for next steps? Could you please expand on your opening remarks in terms of shifting responsibilities back to some of these governments and the private sector? And what's the best way, potentially, to go about that while keeping our gains, but also securing the national security interests of the United States and not continue to do this forever? So I'll yield to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I actually fully agree with all of your comments. And as I mentioned in my open statement, and I'm really focused on it, it is very possible to begin a transition process. And South Africa is one of them. I mean, South Africa actually probably within a year or 18 months with planning could fully transition without losing any lives, but also bringing our private sector in. And there are actually some private sector people here who would be very active there. You asked the best way to do it, and the best way to do it is to work with tangible, with accountable benchmarks for transition in countries based on where they are from a socioeconomic standpoint, and report to you on that transition with reductions on an annual basis in the amount of money, eventually getting down to nothing. But at the same time, work closely with the private sector. And here, as I mentioned, we do not do this well. We have organs of the U.S. government, the Development Finance Corporation, the USDTA, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, but they're off to the side. If we bring them all together and work with our private sector and with the private sector in countries, and I can tell you in South Africa, for example, I work with high net worth individuals who invest in the health sector. They will come in and work with us and are hungry to work with us. So we can transition, we can have plans, we can get, within 2 years, the vast majority of countries transitioning in a clear way, in a sustainable way, without an abrupt, chaotic decline that will maintain the gains, increase the benefits, and also give us maintain the diplomatic and economic opportunity. The alternative is chaotic, chaos, retreat, and loss of all the benefits that have been gained. So it's not, I completely agree with you, it's a matter of time. It is a matter of time planning and benchmarks, and those plans have to be presented to you with clear, sustainable approaches to transition.
Thank you.